Hello everyone. Actually, I don't know. Should I start? Because I'm still waiting for the monitor. Um, our presentation today will be delivered in English. So yes, I'm here. I'm actually here, but I don't know should I start or not. So still waiting for the hosts. Hello everyone. Thank you for joining. Please start. Okay. Anh Vũ ơi, hello. Maybe he's not here. All right, just wait for one more minute. At 1:10, I will start. All right, maybe I should start. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining my section today. Let me introduce a bit about myself. I've just graduated from National Taiwan University of Science and Technology. I've just graduated and holding my master degree. So this is actually a very new experience for me. I've never been doing any webinar like this, but it's my nature. I love to share everything that I can to the community, to the teaching community. So my research interest revolves around multi-literacies pedagogy, reading and writing. And recently, I really love technology-enhanced language learning as well. So hopefully this talk today could give you some takeaways for your in-class practice in the future. All right, so the topic of my talk today is about pondering learners' choices and voices, a step towards autonomous learning. So when I received the topic is about autonomy. So when I think about what will be the main or the central concept for learners' autonomy or autonomous learning, have been walking through several research and also practices, and I found that learner choices is something that should be taken into consideration and account. So that's why here we are talking about learners' choices and voices. So now let's move, without further ado, let's move out onto our table of contents. So there will be 4 parts in my talk today. The first one would be the learner autonomy part, which I will give you the definition and how autonomy is viewed through different perspectives in different fields. And then let's talk about the reading club, how reading can be a little bit more communicative and drives learner to be more autonomous. Next one, I would love to share about the flipped classroom model, which has been here for around like a decade. And finally is composing multimodal output, where technology and autonomy meet each other. But before I start, I really want to know whether you are able to listen to me clearly. Hello? Am I making myself clear? Or should I slow down my speed, please? Okay. All right, thank you. So now let me start with the first part, the learner autonomy. So basically, learner autonomy, or LA, is the ability or the capacity is actually not a skill, but is the ability to take charge of or to be responsible for your own learning. So when you are able to be independent, you know how to direct your own learning, you become more autonomous. Or in different terms, you can say that learner autonomy means decision making. Whether you can decide for yourself on what you do, it would be autonomy. For example, in this picture, it shows that this worker needs to do things that is required by his boss. I need to report my noon. So far, this worker has no autonomy at all. So whether this worker is autonomous or not depend on whether he can make the decision by himself. So autonomy, to keep it simply, it is whether you can take the responsibility for your own learning, whether you can make your own decision, it would be your autonomy. So learner autonomy is believed to be the ultimate goal in learning or language learning. So what I said is the ultimate goal, because in the end, the language learner, our students, they will need to move on by themselves. So making them an autonomous learner would help them to know how to learn and to be a good learner on their own without our guidance in the future. So learner autonomy, not only for language learning, but for any types of learning or disciplines, it would be very useful for lifelong learning. So it could be viewed as the ultimate goal, the final goal that we aim to achieve in the future. So talking about learner autonomy is a multi-dimensional term. So four perspectives through research has been used to view learner autonomy include. The first one is a psychological perspective. When we talk about psychology, it means we talk about the learner's belief, their reflection on their own learning, or their awareness of their own learning. So this is very well posited in the self-determination theory by Deci and Ryan in 1985. So they define that people are able to become self-determined. Self-determined means they are more motivated to learn when they are provided with the right skills to deal with a task, the right environment for social interaction, and the autonomy to decide by themselves. So when the three components have been met, the learner would feel intrinsically motivated to learn. So these three things, once again, is the competence, whether they have the competence to do the job, they have the environment, they have the social interaction for their learning, and finally is the autonomy to decide by themselves. So this is a charge based on the self-determination theory. So the motivation or the control motivation appear when the learner feel that they have to do it. When they have to do a task, then it's a little bit more control. It's a little bit more control. Most of the time, these kind of motivation would come from the external pressure, from the score, from the punishments, from the rewards that the teacher gave. So sometimes you should really consider your rewards. Or from the internal pressure of their own self, that they think that they must do it at any costs. It also costs or drive control motivation, which somehow we should try to avoid. And also moving towards the other end of the spectrum, we can see autonomous motivation, or in other term, we call wantivation. Wantivation means the learner really wants to do it. They really want to do it. So the motivation most of the time would be driven by the usefulness of the task. They see that their learning is really meaningful. They think it's useful and is relevant to them. Then it would trigger the internalized motivation. So when we design activities in the classroom, we really need to focus on the meaning-making process, whether we can make our activity meaningful to the students or not, would lead to the motivation that they may develop to deal with the task. It can also be driven by the value of the task, by the recognition that they want to have, by the interest, the inner interest that they have, that they really enjoy learning. So the environment, the atmosphere, the task value, the meaningfulness of the task would be the key concepts that we really need to focus on or to pay attention to when we want to when we really want to activate student autonomy in their learning. So I received one question asking about, does motivation affect autonomy? I think these two terms are closely correlated, because when you are able to be responsible for your own learning, probably you must be very highly motivated in your learning as well. So hopefully that could answer the question of one of the participants. Next, let's move on to the second perspective. So besides psychological perspective, we have already known that autonomy is driven by our psychological factors like motivation, like the reflection in our own learning, the awareness, the belief in our learning. So the second part would be the technical perspective. So technical perspective centers around the development of learner autonomy in an environment where they can make a choice on what they can learn, when they can learn, and how they will learn. The subject matter. So technical perspective look at the environment where sufficient resources can be provided so that the learner can really make a choice on what, when, and how they are going to learn. So this is a technical perspective. So this environment, when you create it for your student, it should be rich in resources, in materials, in activities, and or technology. So why I add and or here? Because later, when I kind of introduce you some teaching models or methods, some of them may have technology involved, but some of them may not. So as long as the environment is rich with resources, with books, with materials, with well-designed activities and or technology, then it can boost up, it can trigger students or learners' autonomy. The next perspective I want to talk about is a social cultural perspective. So social cultural perspective revolves mostly around social interaction. The environment you create should allow some room for interaction. So when you have the interaction happen between the learner and the learner, as well between the learner and the environment, their learning autonomy would be heightened up. So create an environment rich with resources, materials are not enough. It should be interactive as well. You should allow for example, you put your student in a room full of books, but they don't know how to select the books. They don't know how to interact with the text that they read, or they don't know how to share what they have read with their friends. Then that kind of environment, looking autonomy through the technical perspective wouldn't be effective. So social cultural perspective would be something that we should keep in mind when we want to create an environment to enhance or to activate our learner autonomy as well. So social interaction is the key with the environment and with the people surrounding them. And the final perspective is the political critical perspective. When we're talking about politics or political, it would be something about like talking about politics. You are entitled to be an autonomous person when you are aware of your own responsibility or your own rights, that you have a clear understanding of your own rights and your responsibility of what you are doing and the action that you take and the thinking that you are having. So for learner autonomy, the ideology here focus on they know what they can do to lead their own learning. They have the clear understanding of how to gain the access to the resources, the learning resources around them, and how they can take control of the learning environment. For example, you create an environment full of books for your students to get immersed in. When they will become autonomous, when they know how to select the books suitable for their own interest and their language level. So when they are able to take control of the learning environment, of the resources, they are able to conduct the interaction in that kind of environment. Their political critical perspective of learner autonomy would be enhanced, and their ideology of how to learn, what to learn, and when to learn would heighten up as well. So this is another perspective that learner autonomy has been defined. So for an autonomous learner should be active in his or her own learning. He or she needs to be able to carry out some interaction. He or she needs to be immersed in the environment, rich with materials, rich with resources, and the learning resources should be rich as well. The second criterion for an autonomous learner to be formed is that they can decide upon their learning, what they learn, when they learn, where they can learn, and how they can learn. When they know how to make decisions on their own learning, what, when, and how to learn, then they can become autonomous. The next part is that they are able to reflect upon or evaluate upon their own learning. They know that they make progress. They know that they have learned this or that after a course or after a period of time in a class. So this is actually the teacher role, the teacher job, to let the students really know what they have learned so far. So maybe some kind of checklists for your students would allow them room for reflection and evaluation on their own learning. And to do so, the teacher should become more of a facilitator in the classroom, more than the knowledge provider. Okay, so you should step a little bit aside so that you can guide your student learning, let them to have more room for their autonomy to be developed. And for sure, you should offer more learning choices and chances, more materials carefully selected. And how learning choices and chances can be made, it will be further explained in the later part of my talk. Okay, so make sure that you can understand autonomous learner should be active, should be responsible for their own learning, should be able to make decisions upon their own learning, should be able to reflect upon their own learning. When they are able to do so, they will automatically become autonomous. And for the teacher, you should guide them through their path of learning instead of monopoly, playing monopoly, like being the only provider of the knowledge in the classroom. Okay, you should step a little bit aside, guide them and facilitate their learning, create and design activity that can be meaningful to your students as well. And finally is to offer more learning choices and chances for their learning. So one very important part is that we should be able to measure our students' autonomy. We should be able to make sure that after our treatment, after our educational intervention, our learner actually become more autonomous. So this is one thing that I think probably you can use if you really want to see whether after a period of time of your own teaching or learning, your student can feel that they become more autonomous. So this is a kind of questionnaire measure on the 5-point Likert scale, focusing on the learner's self-perceived learning autonomy. Okay, so there are 5 different constructs, including their autonomous strategy, autonomous learning behavior, learner independence, their confidence, and the characteristics of the autonomous learners that they may meet to become one. So probably after my presentation, I would send you my presentation slide, so you can use it for your future classroom to measure your learner autonomy. Okay. So now let's move on to the second part. We have already finished the first part talking about the definition of learner autonomy, how the student can become autonomous learner, what the teacher should do, and how to evaluate learner autonomy in the classroom. So now, could you please make a guess what English skill is being taught in this class? Okay, so we have several photos here. you can probably reply in the chat box. What English skill is being taught in the class? I'm waiting for your answer, please. Okay. All right, I see some here. Speaking, reading, speaking skill or collaborative skill. Information exchange. Okay, very good. They are recording their friends. Yeah, yeah. Speaking. Okay. Yes. At the very first sight, we can see that a project. Okay, thank you, Miss or Mr. Tan, maybe Miss Tan. Okay. So we can see that through the photo speaks that those students are talking to each other. They may be discussing something, right? They are holding some kind of materials on their hand. They're holding the recorder on their hand as well. So probably at the very first sight, it appears to us that this is some kind of communication or productive skill classes, like speaking or doing some kind of project. However, interestingly, these pictures are taken in a reading class. It is taken in a reading class. So how can reading be this communicative? And should reading be communicative or not? I will answer is in the second part of my talk, joining the reading circle. So the reading circle is something that has happened in those L1 country for so long, where a student will take different roles to discuss the reading content with each other. So I state here the 5 steps. It's just my suggestion. For sure, in between those steps, through your experiments and through your practice, you may need to add some more. So step 1 of the reading circle should start with book choice. The students should share the same books. So first, the teacher really needs to know their levels and their interests, so that the teacher can introduce some book that they can read together, and later they can conduct the reading circle or the reading club together. And second, it would be role assignment. There would be 6 roles in the reading circle, which will be presented later. And then step 3, the student will read the input at home, the book at home, and then they will need to complete their task at home. And then step 4, they will, when they go in class, they will need to join the book club. The teacher at the same time will monitor the whole section. And finally, it's optional. The student can report or reflect upon their own learning or learning experience. So let's talk a little bit about the reading circle. What kind of theory has been underpinned on this kind of practice? So first, the reading circle is based on the collaborative learning through the social constructivism theory of Vygotsky, or in other words, we can say the zooproximal development. The zooproximal development, you can simply put it like you put a student in the environment, in the zoo, where it can develop with a more capable peer. So proximal development means, for example, one student level is this, the other student level is that. So their level is a little bit close to each other. And the higher student, a higher competent student, can probably have the lower one. So there are they should be placed in a zone where the more capable peers can really help the lower performer. Okay, so reading circle is constructed based on the zooproximal development by Vygotsky. The second part is the reader-response theory by Rosenblatt. So Rosenblatt posits that reading is actually an interaction process. It's not like that you are alone. It's not a passive activity, because as a reader, you need to interact with the text. You need to reflect upon the content of the text with your own lived experience. So, and he also explained that reading is not only for relaxation. Sometimes it can be for information as well. Therefore, he put forward two terms, afferent reader and aesthetic reader. So afferent reader or afferent mode of reading refers to you are reading text that give you more information. For example, I am actually an afferent reader. I don't really like reading novels, but I really love reading textbook. I really love reading encyclopedia and maybe dictionary. It's feel weird, right? Or research paper. I really love reading journal article. But aesthetic modes is a little bit different thing. Aesthetic mode explain or describe reader that love to read story, that loves to read something that have events, that have storyline, and all they want to do for reading is for pleasure. To do with reading is for pleasure. They just want to relax. They just want to let the hairs down. But by this way or that way, they still interact with the texts. They still connect the text content with their own learning, with their own experience. Okay. And finally is based on the learner-centered learning. Kosha in 2015 explained that intrinsic motivation to read would be the key concept of learner-centered learning. And along with that, the learner will be more autonomous they will take more responsibility for their own learning when they join the reading circle. So the reading circle is the very first model that I want to introduce in my talk today, because I really know that many of you would hate the idea or would avoid the idea of integrating technology into the classroom, especially for young learners, because you may think that it is not good at all to let our children to get exposed to technology at the very early age. So the reading circle would be one solution or one approach that we can aim for implementing in our classroom. So in the reading circle, as I mentioned before, there would be 6 roles. Actually, there are more suggested roles than this, but most of the time I would use proposal of the 6 roles in the reading circle, including discussion leader. So in a group of 6, there will be a discussion leader. The discussion leader will be the one that guide the whole discussion of the book club. He will prepare some general question for discussion, maybe about content, maybe about the character, maybe about the connection. And then he also the one that monitor the discussion to invite each of the role to speak out what they need to do. He is like a teacher in the classroom. And then we have culture collector. Culture collector is the one that will read the text for sure, and then he will collect some cultural elements in the text that he or she read and compare those cultural elements in the story with the cultural element in his or her own local culture. So culture collector will try to collect, to clean from the text, the cultural elements and make comparison. The next one, the passage person. Passage person will be the one that will make a presentation on the passages that he or she think are interesting, are very well written. For example, he or she said that, oh, I usually see this kind of idea expressed through this kind of structure, but in this passage, probably you can take a look. They express the same idea in a very different way, or the content can be very interesting or even confusing to him or her. So he or she can present his or her reflection or feelings upon the passage that he or she had read. The next one would be the word master. The word master would be the one that will try to select words that are important for the story comprehension. Normally, the number of words wouldn't be too many. 5 words are recommended, because if it's too many words, then it would become a vocabulary instruction section. Okay, so keep it short and simple. 5 words for the discussion. The next one is the summarizer. The summarizer will be the one that make notes on the main events, the characters, and the key points in the story. So the summarizer at the very beginning, the discussion leader would probably invite the summarizer to retell the story to all the participants in the club, to to kind of help them to reflect upon or to recall the content of the story first before the outer role to be activated. And finally is the connector. So the connector is a little bit similar to the culture collector, but the connector here would probably present some kind of connection between the story and the world, or between the story and their own experience or events happen in their life. They can avoid some cultural element to avoid contradiction with the cultural collector. So that is the connector role. He or she will read the text, and then we'll try to find the meaning extracted from the text, how the meaning of the extracted from the text connects with the story, with the world, or with his or her own experience in life. And they will raise discussion further. So these are the 6 roles that often appear in the reading club. So what are the teacher's role in Readers Club? The first one is the orientation. The reading clubs doesn't appear as that as naturally and automatically the student can do. Not at all. So teacher orientation is very important. The teacher really needs to know the student level, language level, and also their interest in reading, so that he or she can help the student to select the books that not only compelling and interesting to them, but also comprehensible because it meets their language level. So the orientation book choice is the very first thing the teacher could do in the class where a reading club take place. And secondly is the role assignment. Teacher is also the person that knows their student most, know about their learning style, know about their personality. So when the student comes to them or us and asked about, teacher, what role should I play in the reading club? Probably you can, based on his or her personality and learning style, to suggest some of the roles suitable for them. Okay, so for example, they're a very active person would be very suitable for discussion leader, right? A student with high critical thinking would be able to deal with culture collector or connector in a room. Okay, a more passive person can do a summarizing role. Okay, so these are the roles that you probably can help your student to decide upon their own learning. And also the role assignment here also mean after each club, you can help the student to switch their role so that they can help more experience in different roles in their club, so that they can make a choice for further learning. The second thing is during the talk, during the club, you will need to go around, join the discussion, and monitor their discussion as well. But don't try to test them, okay? Don't try to test them. Don't get too much involved in comprehension check or work check on their learning, because it may trigger their fear, the anxiety, the external motivation, which is so far from the idea of autonomy that we aim to look at. And finally, and next one is timing. Okay, try to control the time so that the section would be smoothly operated. And finally, it would be reflection. Students should be able to write some kind of reflection on their own learning experience, and as well as their favorite roles to play in a reading club, so that you will know more about their perceptions, and probably you can take some kind of step back to look at your own practice and how you can improve in the next class or next section. Okay, so that's for the book club, and probably I would stop a little bit so that you can raise some question for Q&A. So if you have any question, please turn your microphone or type it down for the Readers Club. Any questions? do you have any suggested age and competency for this circle? This is a very interesting question. Actually, in the US, student do literacy circle. Actually, first, before we talk about language learning, L2 learning, I mean, foreign language learning, let's talk about language learning first. When we are kids, we actually join the literacy club with our own parents, right? Every children grow up joining the community, joining the literacy club of their L1, of the mother tongue community. So there are actually no age required, as well as they can start, and they are able to read, then they can join the literacy. So there is no suggested age. But for our student, it would be a little bit challenging if they do not have enough input first, because so far the reading classes in our country or in our school, mostly it would be about reading text in the textbook. It's not about reading books at all. It's not about reading story or books at all. So for small kids, you can start with story. You can start with very simple story. But for kids, maybe you need to provide input first. Yeah, you need to provide input first, and then start with letting them to retell the story, letting them to find a world. You can step by step make them become more autonomous, step by step. Don't rush to let them read immediately, but first you can tell the story to them. You can all right, you can tell the story to them, ask them to retell the story in their own words. It's summarizing role, right? And then try to assign little by little, step by step. When you feel that, I'm sorry. So when you feel that they are ready to join the literacy club, when they are able to choose their own reading material, then they are really ready for joining the literacy circle. The competency, as I mentioned, when they are able to select the book that they are able to read, and they are able to sit down and read the books, then probably that's the time they can join a literacy club. How long will this activity take? Normally, a section would depend. It would depend much on their level. If the language level is really good, you can let them do it for like 20-30 minutes. But if the lower level, then it will need more guidance. And the time should be limited so that there won't be too much silence and boredom appear in the classroom. So it may need 1 or 2 trials to get to really know how long it could be taken. The story could be taken. For example, when I did the experiment with a Taiwanese student, making them join the literacy club, at first I only set them like 20 minutes, but then later I see their eagerness and their willingness to talk more. So I allow more room, like 30 minutes, 40 minutes in a classroom for the discussion. So that's still fine, okay, for one class. All right. Do you apply autonomous learning to other skill like writing, listening when teaching your student? Actually, for writing, yes. Actually, autonomous learning can take place at any form. For example, you can simply, because this is reading circle is some kind of like a model for us to apply, to bring into the classroom. But some easier activity that you can do to activate your learner autonomy can be vocabulary learning. Like when the student encounter some emergent vocabulary in the reading text that you haven't explicitly instructed or instruct, you can probably they will come to you and ask you, hey teacher, can you help me to explain this word? So my common technique would be free before me. What does it mean by free before me? It means that before you come and ask me this word, try to ask your friend, because one key role of autonomous learning is social interaction. So they need to go around, ask their friends first for explanation. And if they still cannot find a meaning, they can probably come back to me. But make them more autonomous by allowing them to interact with their surrounding, to interact with the resources that are available, instead of depending too much on the teacher. Okay. For listening as well. For writing, I will talk about it later. Okay. All right. So any more questions, please? Yeah. Also for vocabulary learning, you can do vocabulary box. Vocabulary box, like you create a vocabulary box, and you let the student contribute to the box one by one. And then when they do the revision activity, instead of you calling them onto the board and, hey, I will read the translation and you will write a meaning, you just let them select, taking out some strip of paper that they put into it, and they go around and ask their friends whether they are able to explain the meaning of the word or to guess the meaning of the word or not. And then they kind of interact with each other, and they also, if the student, if their friends cannot answer, they can try to explain it, and their friends, through social interaction, will know how to learn more autonomously. Okay. All right, so that's about it for the Readers Club, I guess. All right. Any more question? What is the most difficult part in this activity to you that teachers should anticipate beforehand? The most difficult part would be the orientation. As far as I believe, and I know, reading books is not a practice in most of the EFL classroom in Vietnam so far. They came to class, what they do when they come to class is to read some very boring text from the textbook. So first, I think the very big problem, stumbling block that the teacher should overcome when they want to make the student become more autonomous is make them become reader. When they are able to become reader, for sure, they can become the learner of any subject matter that doesn't necessarily need the role of the teacher anymore. So it's really a matter of whether you are willing to change your reading class or not. Instead of just going to the classroom with pre-white post lesson plan, teaching vocabulary, checking vocabulary, and then reading a text in a very short time, and then answer the follow-up questions, and then maybe asking the students to summarize orally or in their written texts. Instead, you should allow students more room for their own reading. The problem of reading classes in Vietnam is that the reading input is not that a lot. It names is reading class, but when they come to the classroom, they learn vocabulary. They answer questions instead of reading. So this activity somehow is more communicative, but the student need to read a lot of text before they come to the classroom. They need to read a lot before they come to the classroom. So the difficult part is that you need to form the habit of reading for your students. If you want to doing this, you really need to really instill the idea of reading to students, the power of reading to their own learning. If the students are at a very low level, start with storytelling. Because everyone loves story, and story are also very simplified, using very simplified language, and they can love story as well. And then moving upper, you need to know their level so that you can introduce the books to them, and you yourself should be a role model of reading as well. So when everything has been settled, then the Readers Club is something very natural come to the classroom. So maybe the most difficult part to my experience of conducting Readers Club is orientation, is the habit of a student. So before you want to do this, you need to make your student more or less a reader, providing them with more resources and material, very important for autonomy learning. First, before you can go to this communicative stage. Okay, so that's my answer. Any more question, or I could move on, right? Yeah, because I still have two more parts, very interesting parts. So maybe I would love to move on. And thanks a lot for your active participation and Q&A. The next part would be flipping the classroom. Flip classroom is not actually very new to Vietnamese classroom for some part of the area, I guess. So for flipping the classroom, there are also 5 steps that I suggested here. But as I mentioned, there may be more steps that could be done, that could be conducted in the flipped classroom model. So this is just for your reference. Okay. The first one is prepare out of class material. Prepare out of class materials. The second part would be technology orientation, because flipped classroom require technological exposure. So without technological orientation, some students may be at a loss for conducting their own study at home. And then we will have pre-class learning, where the student will use the out-of-class materials that you created, combined with the technology that you guided them to learn the content knowledge before the class. And then in class, we'll have a section for Q&A, where you will address all the student issues related to the content that they have read. And finally is the follow-up activities for the in-class topic. So let's talk about flipped classroom. So here I have 2 pictures here. Drawings is not picture. Traditional class, and this one is flipped class. Okay. So I really want to know your voices about how are these 2 different. Could you please scan this QR code, or probably you can, I will paste. Probably I will paste the link to our chat box so that you can join the Padlet discussion. Okay, so please try to describe or try to tell me the meaning of each drawing that you can elicit. Okay, you don't really need to write your name, you just raise your idea, okay, about how different these 2 drawing could be. Okay. So when you join the Padlet, you will see something like this: drawing 1, drawing 2. Probably you can click into it to see it bigger, to make it bigger, to zoom it out. And then you can click plus, and then you add your answer right here. Okay, I've seen no one. I've seen no one joining the Padlet yet. Hello, are you facing any difficulty getting into the platform? Ah, yeah, okay. I think you can zoom it out, right? Yeah, when you go onto Padlet, you can click on it and it will be zoomed out. It will be enlarged. Okay, I will give you around like 8 minutes. Okay. My question is, you will take a look at these 2 drawings, and then you will try to find out the meaning of each of the drawing. What does it mean in each of the drawing? Or try to simply describe the drawing. Okay, I'll give you guys like 7 minutes. Okay. Hold on. So far, I have seen no answers at all after even 8 minutes. Are you all still? No, it's not just 5 minutes, right? Okay, refreshing the page. Thank you for your reminder. Is this remake? No, it's not remake. How can I refresh it? Hold on. Okay, hold on. I'll try. All right. Okay, thank you. I see. Very nice. I opened it for so long without recognizing that. Okay, so let's see some of your answers right here. For drawing one, so this is a drawing one, they say traditional class with direct instruction with someone, blah, blah, blah. Passive learning, yes, correct or not, and question mark. And out of class, some more question mark right here. So teacher is the center of the class. So another one said, in class, teacher keeps talking, student don't understand. And out of class, student don't understand the lesson. TTT is too much, student are only passive. Traditional classes, students are not equipped with sufficient tools or guidance for self-paced learning. Teachers does most of the things, students learn passively. Some student may not understand the lesson. In class, the teacher tries to help student with memorizing and understanding the knowledge. Some get, some don't, some get confused. Our class students struggle with further steps to really master the knowledge. This is what I have been enjoying so far. Thank you. But I treasure the others as well. Student listen to teacher. Student passively acquire the knowledge delivered by the teacher. After listening, they may not be able to summarize what the teacher said, which leads to ineffective learning process. They have, for example, they have something related to the science term, but cannot apply to real life. Teacher here plays a guidance role, helping the student to understand the material in the easiest way. The same kind of knowledge and thought is transferred. In class, teacher gives instruction directly to the student. Student receive passive knowledge. Student can't use the knowledge out of class. Okay, and for this is drawing number 2. We can see teacher is guy on the side, and then student, some of them take on further step with group space. We also see the lower part without class flip, with direct instruction turning into created material, and would understand, remember something like here, and in individual space in class flip for remember, understand. Okay, so let's see what you say. Student are center. Student center classroom, they are active in learning. Students have more access to hands-on learning, thereby retaining more knowledge due to their immediate usage in conversation with other students. It could be hard for some introverted or inactive students to join in, but it would much rather be all by themselves. But overall, this type of classroom is becoming more and more popular. Students mostly work with their friends. Students find out the knowledge by themselves. Students are center. Students actively take part in discussing with friends for tasks. Students just come to the teacher when they need help. Teacher are facilitator. Students broaden their knowledge by their own and also through the teacher. With the teacher's guidance and support from the teacher, student work individually in teams group to practice and acquire the knowledge. Okay, I hear some very interesting thoughts of you. Actually, the idea of flip learning is becoming prevalent in recent years. So what actually flip learning is, and what are some myths about the flip learning that we may encounter when we do flip our classroom? Okay, so I will tell it to you right now. So the flip classroom, by definition, flip classroom is like you use technology to deliver asynchronous direct instruction with the intention of freeing up the class time for student-centered learning. So it means that when we have some content knowledge that we need the student to know, but probably, usually it would take place in the class. But now, and normally when they already acquire the knowledge, the content knowledge, they have no more time to apply it. So the idea of flipped learning is that you will move that basic part, that content knowledge part of remembering and understanding outside the classroom using asynchronous learning activities. For example, you ask a student to read and take notes, you ask them to watch a video instruction, listen to a podcast, or explore the resources that you have created, like using Quizlet, engage in online discussion, or something such like. So asynchronous direct instruction is moving outside of the class. Some basic content knowledge, such as vocabulary, such as format of the writing, such as the structure. You move it outside the classroom and you let the students explore it by themselves, so that when they come to class, you have more time for the production stage. So that is the very general idea of the flipped classroom. So the three components of flipped classroom include, first, the instruction, as I mentioned, should be delivered asynchronously. And in class, teacher only play the role of further explaining or explicating the knowledge that some student may face difficulty. The second part would be the student have immediate and consistent access to the information. Why I say inconsistent? Because if they don't have internet connection, it would be very hard for the flipped classroom to happen. But it's not really a matter, because as I show you this slide, if the student can really get access to the material, to the resources at home consistently using their internet, using the computer, then probably it's good. But if they don't, they can do it in class as well. They can really do it in class or before class. You can give them some individual space for their own learning using your created material and provide them with the technological tools to do so. Okay. And then we need to have teachers are available during the class time to answer questions and to guide the learning, to answer the questions and to guide the learning. Teachers are not in the class to re-lecture what they have already delivered to their student beforehand. Okay, so don't use flipped classroom to try to reteach the content knowledge that you have already let the student to explore by themselves. I know that some of you may be very afraid that some students, they may not really watch the video, or they may not really try to explore the knowledge by themselves, but we will talk about that later. Okay, so the myth right here is some people believe that flipped learning is the flip of homework with lecture. You give student to do the homework in the class and the lecture at home. Okay, so it means that you will move your lecture part to out of class, and then when they are in class, you let them do comprehension exercise, something like that. So what is the fact? The fact is that flipped learning is actually flipping the Bloom taxonomy. But actually, if you really flip, the Bloom taxonomy is out of reality. Normally, the Bloom taxonomy would look like the triangle, with the remembering and understanding part be the biggest, and then it becomes minimized when it moves to the top of creating. And then flipped classroom is the idea, not the idea of flipping the time, but the idea of flipping the level of knowledge. But when you really flip the whole triangle upside down, it would be that remembering and understanding a little bit smaller, and then it would be the biggest part for evaluating and creating. But it kind of out of reality in the classroom. That's why this diamond format emerged. For sure, time should be given more for the upper level part of the Bloom taxonomy, but applying and analyzing are parts where more focus should be paid to. Okay, more attention should be paid to instead of evaluating and creating. For sure, if you have the ideal class where the students are all good, they can create project after project. For sure, this part would be very big. But in reality, every class had multiple abilities and language levels. So just focusing on applying and analyzing is enough. Okay, so that's why flipped classroom is not flip homework and lecture. Don't use the time for homework in the class. when you flip your lecture outside of the class, use the in-class time for different activities that can really activate student application skill and analytical skill. Okay, so that's the myth and the first myth and the first fact. The second myth is time should be spent on creating videos and creating resources for student pre-class learning. So some new flippers, some new flipping teachers, when they try to do flip learning, they really focus on creating video so that they can really deliver the instruction to the student effectively, resting assured that all the student can get the content knowledge. And they are actually creating the burden for themselves. They're creating the pressure on their own shoulder. The fact is that more time should be spent on designing higher level activities, meeting individualized needs, right? So instead of spending all the time for creating videos, I will give you some more tips later. You should spend more time on thinking about what activities, after the student have already acquired, mastered all the knowledge outside the classroom. When it comes to the classroom, what can they do? And what can students at different levels do in a class so that they won't need to really chase after their higher performer peers? Okay, so more activity should be carefully designed so that lower performer could be put in a group to only maybe apply the knowledge to doing some kind of task. But higher level, they will have more chances to explore further, to create something. So this is very important. It takes more time, and you should also devote more time for designing higher level activities in the classroom instead of spend more time for creating the pre-class material. So this is the second myth. So what teachers really need to know and really need to anticipate before they flip their class. The first one, flip classroom takes more time than we think. Some of us may think that, when I flip the class, it would take me less time to lecture in the classroom. I'll be more free. I'll have more time. Not at all. Because first, you need to spend time on looking for or creating pre-class learning material. And in the classroom, you still need to monitor the in-class activity besides coming up with a lot of ideas for activities suitable for different learners at different levels. So it takes more time than we think, but probably we can reuse the material. So collaboration could be the key. You can collaborate with some of the other teachers in the school, in the community, to create some kind of flip learning materials for your grade level, for the grade level that you teach, so that we can exchange and we can share. So it would take less time for creating the pre-class material. And then for the in-class design, for sure, sharing is also some kind of practice that we should do so that it could give us more idea and takes us less time for designing the activity. The second part is that, as I mentioned, you don't need to put so much pressure or emphasis on designing or creating videos for the student. High quality resources are available for us to use and repurpose. So do it. So when you want to teach a letter of complaint, go on the internet, YouTube. You have thousands of videos talking about that. Okay. So probably you can, all you need to do is to watch, to really evaluate the content, whether it meets your demand and your student language level or not. And then you probably can take that to your own repertoire and use it for the student pre-class learning. So try to make use of the available materials. The third part is not every student is going to enjoy this idea, because you know what, some of them, they just want to sitting through the lecture. It's way, right? They will learn nothing, but they don't care. So sitting through the lecture is easier for them. So when you really implement flipped classroom, don't expect everyone to like it. Don't expect everyone to like it. Okay, right. And not every lesson needs flipping. it means it doesn't mean that when you see flipped learning, oh, it's very effective. It allows for individualized instruction. It's allowed for student effective learning, autonomy, development, and something like that. So I will flip every lesson of mine. It isn't necessary to do so. So focus on productive skill, because the very main problem of our classroom teaching is that we don't have enough time for speaking and writing. So speaking and writing can be the focus for flipped classroom practice. Okay. And finally, the design of in-class activities is key to a successful flip. So think of something that can help your student to activate higher level thinking skill in the classroom. That is more important. So before I try to do with a Q&A, I will probably show you one product that I and my classmates, when we took a course in flipped learning, we have done. So let's take a look together, so that you can probably have an idea of what a pre-class material can look like and what a student can do. All right, I'll share sound. What's this? You can see the screen, right? Oh, in order to do this, I may need my earpod. All right. Hello, can you hear the sound? You can't hear? No? Okay, let me share the screen again. How about now? Can you? How about now? Still not? Okay. I will read this. Okay. Normally I can share the sound. I don't know why this time is. Yeah, I know. I usually use this, but I just don't know what happened today. Okay, so
this got me thinking, what other machine? Good morning, class. I'm just sitting here having a cup of coffee.
all right. I would try to speed up a little bit, because if it's too slow, then it would take us more time. Okay.
Thinking about a lesson last week involving that broken coffee machine. If that happened to me, no doubt I would be writing an angry email. Considering how much I love coffee, it would be difficult to get throughout the day without it. So this got me thinking, what other machines do we use every day that it's difficult to live without? I'm sure a laptop would be at the top of our list. Unfortunately for my friend Husky, that's exactly the situation he's found himself in. Let's go have a look.
Days later.
Oh no, what's happened? It doesn't work.
Hi, this is the customer service of the laptop company. May I help you?
Hello, I am Husni. I want to complain about my laptop. It doesn't work. I have a lot of busy today. I have a lot of deadline. I want to replacement.
Sorry, when you provided last week, I think it will take 1 week to process your request.
But the guarantee said I can't have a new replacement right now.
Are you sure? I don't remember. Which line is it?
Okay, I don't need to. I will email your manager about this.
Oh my God. I've just received a complaint letter from a customer. And They seem to be more serious than other cases I have ever dealt with. Oh, how can I respond to this email?
Okay, it looks like Liz is facing a sticky situation here with an angry customer. The way she responds might be the difference to whether she keeps this client or loses him forever. Now, this might seem like a lot of pressure or a bit scary, but there are a few simple tips that you can do to break this down. Liz might need a little help, so let's go help her. Okay, here we go. Now we're going to look at responding to a complaint email. We're going to help Liz out with this, looking at these 4 areas: the structure, some do's and don'ts, some alternate phrases, and then finally, we'll finish with some practice. So firstly, the most important part is to simply hit these 5 parts of the structure. We have reference the mistake or the problem, apologize for the mistake, say what's going to be done, give some assurances, and lastly, a polite closing. So let's look at each of these in a little more detail. First, we need to reference the problem. This will look something like this. I understand your frustration, and I appreciate you bringing this issue to my attention. So here we may want to empathize with the customer, and we make sure that we are on the same understanding about the problem. Next, we need to apologize for the mistake. I'm really sorry that you've had a disappointing experience with your purchase. So this one is quite easy to do. Just simply say you're sorry. Most of the time, the customer will be very appreciative to just know that they are being understood. Next, say what's going to be done. Here, we need to take some action. I have spoken to our customer service manager, and I am able to replace these products for you at no charge. This is probably the most important part of the response to a complaint email. The customer wants to see some action. Next, we give some sort of assurance. This is like a promise, but it should be a small promise. I assure you that your replacement will be sent out soon, and I will provide you with a tracking number. And finally, we need to have some sort of polite closing, which may look like this. Thank you for your patience as I sort this out for you, and I hope you enjoy your new laptop. Okay, so this is the basic structure that you need to have. And it's not exactly set in stone, but I recommend you follow this basic model. But now let's look at some of these do's and don'ts that are common mistakes that people may make. Firstly, let's look at some things that we do want to do. We do want to be sincere. Make sure that you're not being sarcastic. Make sure that you use some friendly language. I recommend medium formality. We still want to be very professional, but we don't want to be too formal and create distance. Next, acknowledge and validate their feelings. Make sure that you let the customer know you can understand why they're maybe disappointed or upset, and that this is a reasonable response that they're having. And fourth, make a small assurance you can keep. Build back trust. So when I say a small assurance, make sure this is something you can really follow through. It may simply be, I can't answer your question today, but I will email you tomorrow. When you do actually email tomorrow, you take a big step in reestablishing trust. Now, let's look at some of the don'ts. I recommend don't be overly formal. People are very turned off when the language in an email is overly official or too formal. They may feel like you are a robot or that you're uncaring about their problem. Don't focus too much on the problem. Think about the solutions. So it may be a temptation to go into a lot of detail and explain the problem, but frankly, this will probably come across as excuses. So I think it's best that you just focus on solutions. Never, never blame your colleagues. You might be disappointed or frustrated with another department, but you need to maintain a unified face for the customer. And lastly, don't promise the moon. By this, I mean, do not make wild promises that you will never be able to keep. This will only frustrate the customer more. Just make some small assurances and be sure that you do actually follow through with those. Okay, so now we've seen the structure, we've seen a couple of things that I recommend you do, some things you don't do. Let's look at some different types of language that you may use in your email, depending on the situation. So here we go. This is our first part of the email. Dear Husni. Now, we need to refer to the issue. You may do this with something like, thank you for letting us know about, or thank you for raising your concern about. Next, what do you need to do? That's right, you need to apologize. So we have the original text here and some alternate text. I must apologize for, I really regret that. Of course, you can always use the very classic, very simple, I'm really sorry. What is the next part of the email? Can you recall? That's right. You need to take some sort of action. What's going to happen next? So you can see on the left, the original text, some alternates that you may use. I'm still looking into, I have done some investigation and found that. So this shows that we are taking some action to fix the problem. The fourth part of the structure, can you remember? It's to make an assurance about some corrective action. You may do this by saying something along the lines of, I will do my best to, or I aim to do an action by a particular time. And what's the final part of our email? Correct. This is a closing, maybe also praising the customer to make them feel good about their how they're behaving in this situation. So the original text, thank you for your patience. It may be something along the lines of your satisfaction is important to us. Once again, please accept my apologies. These are nice ways to close out your email. Okay, so are you ready for some practice? I think you are. If you need to go back and take some notes, feel free to rewind the video now before you practice. Let's go ahead and begin the practice. Okay, now here, there's a QR code. You can scan this and access a Google document, or you may also use the link in the description of the video. So number one, what is the recommended structure? Put these letters into order. So you could have A, B, C, D, E, E, D, C, D, A, or any sort of combination. Number two, which one is not something to avoid? Promising too much, making an assurance, blaming colleagues, using extremely formal language. So remember, this one is which one is not something to avoid. In other words, which one of these is not in the group of things I called don'ts. Number three, write one thing that you should do when writing a response to a complaint email. So as a hint, this is from the do section. Number four, I will aim to do an action by a time is an example of which part of the email? An apology, a reference to an issue, an assurance, or the closing. And last, number five, have you ever written a complaint email? Tell me about it. What was the response like? You don't have to go into a lot of detail, but I'm curious if you've had any experience with this. Okay, so these are the basic structures. Feel free to rewind the video if you need to. Okay, great. So now you've seen how a company can respond to a customer complaint and try to smooth it and give them an outcome that they're satisfied with. So watch this video as many times as you need. Familiarize yourself with the phrases that we've covered here today. And
All right, I think maybe that's enough. Okay. I hope that the sound does well. Okay. So that's the part of pre-class material. So before coming to the class, a student will need to really learn all the knowledge, the content knowledge that's necessary for the writing section in class. So in the class, the student will, it depends on the time that you have for your writing class. We in the class, after some Q&A section, we allow students some space for their collaborative writing so that it can contribute to the writing together before they come to some individualized writing later. So that's about it for the flipped classroom. And I'm looking forward to some of your questions. I have seen one, so we'll try to answer it first. Should we concern the copyright available video for our flipped classroom? For sure, we should state the sources. Whenever we use any kind of source, resource online, we need to give credit to the creator. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm still looking for more questions. So please feel free. We'll have around like 5 to 10 minutes for Q&A before I move on to our last section. So if you have any concern about anything related to flipped learning, please feel free to ask. What would you do with a student who didn't review the lesson? So as I mentioned before, when it comes to class, and we recognize that we may need to ask them for the situation first, and then later we can provide them with some space so that they can do the individualized learning. Because some of the students, they may not be able to complete the learning because they don't have the computer, or their internet connection might suddenly be broken. So when it comes to class, some of them, the tools, technological tools, and the material should be available for them to preview in a class before they can proceed to the next stage of the activities where their friends are doing. Okay, did I answer your question? And how about others? Any more questions, please? Yes, yes. Not all students like this idea. They didn't even like the language classroom. They don't even like language classroom, but just let them be. At least you provide them with the material where they can rewind and they learn at their own space. Yeah, they can learn at their own space, at their own pace. Okay. All right, if no more question asked, let's move on to our very last section. Some of you may wonder, when I talk about in-class activity, design in-class activity to kind of activate the higher level in the Bloom taxonomy, what should I do? Okay, so the answer could be multimodal composing. Composing multimodal output is like a trend in recent years. If you look at the number of publications and research journal articles on this field, it would be a lot in the last 5 years. So the step is also the suggested step that I raised. No more resources. So first, step 1 would be the language input. Step 2 would be the language output. This is similar to reading, writing, or listening, speaking. And then step 3, it would be a little bit different, is meta-language input. Meta-language input is, just make it simple, is that the student, when they compose multimodal output, they'll need to have some knowledge about how to make videos, how to select images, something like that. So it would be the meta-language input. And then we have multimodal output, and finally is publication. Okay. So why and what is multiliteracies? So the normal literacy, as we all know, is the ability to read and write. When you are able to read and write, you are literate, right? But the recent world is evolving so fast. With the mass media, we have the mass media, with the internet spoil a whole new genre of texts. We don't usually see only texts on the paper. We see text and image. We see text and inside a comic strip. We see something like that. Okay. And the globalization process. So through the globalization process, we really need to navigate the differences between the normal or the traditional literacy to the new literacy, combining other literacies like visual literacy, digital literacy, and so on, as well as social advancement. So the definition of being able to read and write now has been changed a little bit to the ability to read and do a lot of things with writing. So multimodal composing include different modes for communication. So in our communication, we do not only use language as the main semiotic mode, as the main symbolic mode that for our communication. We also use images, the visual mode. We also use sound, music, background music, or ambient sound. For our mode, we also gesticulate with our hands, with our body language, and for sure we communicate with each other to the spatial, how close we stand, how far we stand with each other, where we stand in the classroom also affect our communication effectiveness as well. So multimodal composing is that you try to combine more than one mode in your composition. So normally when we write, we would only have texts, but now when students write, they should have something more like text and visual, or even video, sound. Okay, so that's the idea of multimodal composing. So what is multimodal composing? As I explained, is using language, one semiotic mode with other semiotic modes to create meaning. So some examples of multimodal composition could be digital storytelling, could be interactive novels, could be magazine, could be comic strips, could be vlogs, and so on. So all of these require the student not only the use of the language that they have learned, but also the use of technology, technological knowledge, technological competence, so that they can make meaning out of their learning. Okay, they can actually create something. They can make decision on what kind of product they want to create. They can make a decision upon the tool that they use to create the products. So they have a lot of decision to make. They have a lot of choices to make. And through making those decision and choices, they become more autonomous as well. Okay. And they not only develop their competence in language, but also the competence, the literacy in different fields like digital literacy or visual literacy. Okay, so these are some examples that you can probably implement in the classroom. And for pedagogical implication, for multimodal composing is very important because multimodal composing by its name is the output oriented. When we compose, it means we produce the language. But keep in mind that without input, we cannot compose anything multimodally. The input here is the language input. The input here can be the meta language input, the knowledge of making video, the knowledge of arranging pages. Those are all the input that we need to provide the student before we let them to the multimodal composing process. The second thing is the meta language. As I told you, it could be the knowledge of making video, the knowledge of how to effectively select a good photo to illustrate your text. So this knowledge should be instructed to the student. But some teachers are not an expert in this field. So possibly you can refer to experts in the field to help you with the meta language part. Like you can invite some expert in video making. When I do multimodal composing, I usually ask my former students to go back and give the junior some kind of meta language. But scaffolding conducted by the EFL teacher is necessary. It means that after the student receive the meta language knowledge from the expert, you should be the one that give feedback on their products. You should be the one that can recommend them to work further on their selection and their choices. Okay. L1 can be used for technical training. So for technical training, it means they are exposed to a different universe. They are getting into a different universe. They are learning about video making. They are learning about choosing images, taking photos, taking films. So not all of them can really get the idea, the whole idea through L2. So here you can probably allow for some L1 use in the classroom. For the composing process, As I mentioned, we have input process and language output process. So from the language input to the language output, teachers' feedback is very, very important. If they have to write, then you need to give feedback on their writing. If they have to say something, they need to speak, they need to narrate, they need to tell the story, then you need to give feedback on their oral recording so that they can actually gain something through the process of multimodal composing. For the digital pre-production stage, I mean, before they really compose the multimodal output, they need to plan something, because some students, they just randomly go to the internet and then they select some image so they can put into the magazine, or they can put into their poster, for example, something like that. It wouldn't be the final goal for multimodal composing, because multimodal composing is to be able to develop different literacies. So besides the language competence, they will need to be able to know about the visual literacy, for example. They need to be able to sense the aesthetic parts of the image. So they need to be critical in selecting the image, the music for the multimodal output as well. Okay, so planning is very necessary. When students plan, you can give them feedback whether the choice of the image that they want to include in their composition is necessary, is relevant or not. Okay. So before we come to the conclusion, I would show you some of the products, some of the multimodal components that I and my student have done so far. So it could be here. Okay. So, and all of these products are done in the language classroom at the senior high school, All the students are not English major. They're not English major. They're just normal student. Okay. So here we can see some video, we can see some magazine, we can see some comic strip. I will show you one by one. Maybe we'll see the comic first, how it works. Okay. So this is the comic that created by the student. So it talks about the Earth family. We have one page for credits. And then the student, they sketch their drawing on the paper, and then they will scan the drawing and put it on Photoshop. And they will use Photoshop to pour in the color. So for this part, they will need to learn. They will need to really learn about how to do it with the expert. And then they will have the text right here. So here, this is multimodal composing. We have text and we have images, we have drawings. Okay. Instead of just writing the story alone, we try to combine visual mode into the composing process. Okay, it's something like this. Or another one. This is also a comic. Okay, all right. Also drawing and then using text to illustrate the drawing. Using image to illustrate texts. Okay, this talks about hobby, and all come from the student drawing. Another one also talking about Save the Ocean. He used the image of Nemo. Okay, and this have the composition bubble. Also draw on the paper and then scan and then put on the computer and then pour in the color. All right, one more, something that is the same. Okay. So this is one project that I've done with multimodal composing. The second part would be for the magazine. So for a magazine is a little bit more professional because the student will need to work more on their writing. They need to really polish their writing after several drafts together with me and my reflections. And they need to learn how to organize the text into different columns to lay out the texts, the image, yeah, something like that. So that it could look more like the original or the author magazine. So this is also multimodal composing. Okay. This is their second product. this is a second edition. So they took some feedback from the customer. They sell the magazine after they created it. And then they collect some feedback from the customer. And then they try to change the layout a little bit by giving more color, something like that. And also upgrade their content so that it can suit the customer wants and needs. Okay. And those are the two bimodal. Bimodal, it means only text and image. I have just done one project with Taiwanese students, doing digital storytelling. So now let me show you some of their products. This is also senior high school student, grade 10. So in this, they are going to tell their own story and they are going to make a video for that. Okay, so I hope it works. Let me enlarge it.
It was on January 1st when we first met. I stopped at the 7 near my house to buy some instant noodles. I gazed at him and he looked back at me emotionlessly. His eyes were so beautiful that it seemed to draw me into his pure inner world. An eerie feeling drove me to say something to him to get to know him. Happy New Year, I blurted out. Happy New Year, he simply replied. And I was like, damn, I'm gonna dig a hole and bury myself. Then I just left after I said goodbye. My heart was filled with shame when I got home. I directly ran to bed, wrapping myself with my comforter, regretting why I was so impulsive, then falling to sleep. That's how we first met. Despite my embarrassment, days later I still visited the store over and over again. One day as I stopped at him, I started chatting with him. He sat down next to me with his shoulder leaning against mine, sharing with me some Instagram posts about adorable animals. He didn't know that he was the most adorable in my view. Till now, it's still true. But still, we're not yet a couple. Then one day before school started, I was a bit drunk after drinking alone. With such courage, I went to 7 and asked him to give me his ID. Instead of asking him frankly, I gave him my phone with an ID searching interface. But to my surprise, he decided to share his pasta with me first. The dish was too spicy, and this made me even nervous. I wondered whether he would give me his ID or not. Fortunately, he gave it to me in the end. What a relief. Since he's a vegetarian, he often refuses to eat out with people for fear that he may bother others' appetite. Though I was a meat eater, I definitely could not miss the chance. So I said, you could invite me if you want. And he said yes. Finally, he invited me for dinner. I felt extremely excited about it. That was weird because I'm not usually a proactive person, but his passiveness made me more active than who I really am. Our first day was full of joy. After weeks of chatting and times of dating, he eventually confessed his feelings, saying that he fell for me. That was about 2 a.m. My heart beat fast. My mind danced along the happiness zone in the world. I have been the luckiest person at that time until now, till forever. He treats me like I'm a really thin treasure. He cooks for me, he cares for me for even such little things. He praises me for every nice job I did. He takes me every single minute. He keeps his promise all the time, and so on. Anyway, what I want to say is, you have me a Happy New Year. Estoy feliz porque te conocí. Frank.
All right, so that's the first video. Let's watch maybe one more. Maybe Jessica about her mom. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jessica. I'm going to talk about the story of an extraordinary hero in my life. When I was young, I had depression. The reason why I suffered from depression was because at the age of 14, when I was at junior high school, my best friend had a boyfriend who was also our classmate. They had a great time every day until another girl in our class left the boy. That girl was trying to flirt and steal my best friend's boyfriend's heart. And eventually her tricks worked and they started their relationship. This event made my close friend become a heartbroken girl. But this is not a reason why I got my depression until now. The major reason was that all the girls in our class started to bully my friend and since I was her best friend. They started to isolate me as well. Since my friend couldn't endure these bad words anymore, she decided to transfer to another school. Since then, I was alone every day. Through all these problems, my mom was the only person who helped me to get through all the bad feelings in time. To other people, this may not be a big deal, but for a high school girl like me, all those inconsiderate behaviors and words left a deep scar in my heart. I felt so lucky to have my mom as a person who loves me immeasurably and cares for me unconditionally. My mom is not only a mother, but also my close companion who I can share everything with. With her beside me, my life has been extraordinary.
All right, so that's the second, another video of the students. So actually I have a lot. Maybe after this sharing, no, not after this, I will share with you immediately. You can get through this folder and you can watch more. You can also take a look at all of the materials. Later, I will upload my presentation slide onto this. Okay. So before we come to the conclusion, if you have any question for multimodal composing, please do. Okay. You're welcome. You're welcome. I love to share because this, after doing all of those stuff, I see that student can really feel the meaning of learning language, which I really like. And some of you may ask, how about the exam? They still did very well in the exam, to my surprise. They still did very well in the exam without much instruction, without much practice as compared to other classes that I did. But their results still surprise me. All right, so question, please. If you don't want to type, you can probably open your microphone, turn your microphone and say something. All right, so while you're typing, I would come to the conclusion to save us time, because I know that it's been like nearly 2 hours. Okay, so the conclusion is that learner autonomy develop upon choices, allow for decision making, for resources selection, and technological use and application. So make sure that you let your student decide on what they want to learn, when they want to learn, where they want to learn, and how they want to learn. You provide them with rich resources, maybe of books, maybe of stories, and you give them the tools for their design, for their creativity to be activated. Then their autonomy would be heightened. Second, for pedagogical practices, the reader clubs allows choices of input and roles suitable for student learning style and personality. So the reader club is the very basic idea of enhancing learners' autonomy without the use of technology. So if technological application is something that is far to reach, that's very difficult to reach in your region or your area, try with the Readers Club, try to build up the love for reading in your student. Instead of asking them to read text after text in the textbook, try to provide them with story, try to provide them with creative readers, with novels, with fictions that would help a lot. Sorry, not remember, but believe me, making a student a reader is a step making them to become autonomous learner. We learn everything through reading. For flipped classroom and multimodal composing, both of them allow for technological application and production central. Those two are very central to developing learner autonomy. Okay, so that is the takeaway for my section today, and I hope that it did help you in some part of your pedagogical practice in the future, in how to get to know your learner autonomy, and as well as how to activate their autonomy in the language classroom. Okay. So please, I still wait for your question if you have any.
Hi, Mr. Sang.
Okay, hello.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your presentation. The sharing is great. Okay, so I love the products that are done by the students. So I just have one question, because this one I think I would say very useful and encourage students autonomous learning. However, how can you manage the time for the students to do? Suppose that you have to deal with the class with about 40 to 50 students. So how can you manage the projects like this?
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot for your question. It really depends on the scale of the project that we really want to conduct in our classroom. For example, the project that I have been doing, that I had done with my Vietnamese students, the class are around like 40, okay, 35 to 40 students. So I try to divide them into smaller groups. So each group would be taking charge of one multimodal products. Some of them may be taking charge of the video part. Some of them would be taking care of the product of the Facebook page, where they will deliver the information and the publication of the products. Some of them would go for the marketing skill, where they will try to sell the product created by their friends. Some of them would be composing the written material like magazine or comic strips. So they have different role to play. And the time management is that I usually spare one class per week only, instead of teaching them writing or teaching them reading. So I would use one class a week for the project. So most of the time I would ask them to report on their work in the past week. So then I will give them feedback. I will check their process. That's all what I do in the class. So not much time management actually, but I set them some deadline. They really need to run behind the deadline for most of the time. But for the project that I have done with the Taiwanese students, most of the time, because they do it individually, each of them will need to create one digital story. So the process is quite fixed. I will work with them 1 hour a week. So the process would start with they writing the script, and then I give feedback on their script and on their storyboard, and then they will continue to revise the script time after time. Okay, so after that, they have the finalized version. They will start to practice in narrating, in telling the story out, and they record the video, the recording, and put it onto Google Drive. And then I will show you, okay? And then I will try to give them some feedback on that as well. And after my feedback, they will start to revise their, they try to revise their oral recording. And okay, here. And after they revise their oral recording, they will learn how to make the video. They will plan first. Here you can see the student work. So where is that? Oral practice recording. So they will put their recording here, and then I will put their script right here as well. I give them feedback, something like that. And then they will work on their plan. So I have one folder for the plan, where they will try to plan what they are going to put. Each of them will have one folder. They have to try to put what they intend to do with the video into the plan. I give them an example so that they will know how to do. And then, for example, they have the text. What image would they use? What kind of music they are going to use? Because we are developing multi-literacies about image awareness and sound awareness as well. Okay, so they are going to put it here. And then they will have peer feedback checklist where they will give feedback for their peers. Okay. And after that, they will compose the video and they will put the video, the final video into one folder. Okay. Into one folder right here, all the video, so that I can take a look and then I can arrange the time for their publication as well. So the time, normally it would be one class a week. And if there are a lot of work, a lot of different groups, then the time should be devoted to work report. Before that, you really need to set the deadline for the student. But if the project is some kind of like individual oriented, so it can follow the procedure. For example, for digital storytelling, we'll start with script writing, and then oral practice, and then practice, and then planning, production, and post-production. Post-production means they will receive feedback and they will try to polish their multimodal composition. Okay, I'll put it here. That's the process that I usually do. Yeah, each for 1 to 2 weeks. All right. So is there any more question, please? Okay, please, Miss Võ Tuyết Thanh, I guess so.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your information. And I would like to ask you a question. What type of students are your activities aimed at? Because as you can see that at 12 a.m. today, the students of continue the results for their national examination, and English, as for English, it had the lowest score, and many parents are really worried about their study, especially their score for the final exam. And I am a high school teacher, and when I carry out some activities that are similar to what you have been doing to your students, like I ask my students to make videos or presentation about some topic, and connect with them with other teachers and students from other countries. One class for a week or one class for a month. But at the end of when they go to high school, their parents go to my house and they tell me that, teacher, you should teach my students grammar only, not do some activity like you do, like making videos or some projects, mini projects. And what should I do in this case? Can you give me some advice? If I still want to do that for my student, but their final aim is to have a high score in the national examination.
Yeah,
it's very difficult for me, not only for me, but I think for many teachers to carry out activity like what you are doing with your students.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm very it's very understandable for your situation. I faced that on my situation as well. That's why most of my project I would carry it out with grade 10 or grade 12 or grade 11 students. But for grade 12, some of the time I still ask them to do some kind of multimodal composition, like making CVs, making poster for grammar revision. So for grammar revision, probably you can ask them at the end. Normally at the end of the first semester, I would do some kind of like gallery walks where the student will walk in through, and they are going to make some poster to summarize the grammar points that they have learned so far in the first semester. And then they will try to exhibit their work to their peers, and the peer will walk around to revise their grammar lesson. So maybe try to, my advice is that you can still do multimodal composing with the student But with grade 12 student, it should be carried out a little bit more careful because a little bit more carefully because the parents' pressure, the parents' ideology may be different from ours, and it can hinder our implementation as well. So the content of doing, for example, like doing grammar revision using multimodal composing or some kind of activities that can really help the students to review their knowledge, the learned knowledge would be an idea. And don't spend too much time doing so. But for sure, it still can be applicable if we reduce the time a little bit. Yeah. So if they want grammar, you can do multimodal composing with grammar. Okay, that can be one suggestion. Thank you. Okay. All right. Is there any more question, please? It's a big question, hard to change the mindset. Yeah, I know. It's very hard. That's why most of my experiments are carried out on the two lower grades. Yeah, and I still got complaints sometimes. But when I did invite those parents coming to the exhibition day for them to see what their children have been doing so far. I did. I received all those complaints about, too much time outside the classroom, too much work, deadlines all the time. But then when they have the product, I did invite those parents into the classroom to observe, to witness their children's accomplishments. And they did surprise about it. But still, there needs to be some negotiation. Most of the time I would negotiate with the student first, whether they want to do it or not, before I truly carry it out. Yeah, I'm still waiting for more questions. So any more? If you don't have any question, please say no, so that I will know. And Mr. Wu, hello, are you still here? I'm feeling quite lonely. Okay, so is there any closing speech or something? Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Miss Mai. Okay. So if you have any further questions, probably you can email me, okay, or text me via my Facebook Messenger. Thank you for enjoying the section. Okay. Anh Vũ ơi, mình có closing gì không ta? Chắc là nhờ mọi người, chắc mình chụp chung một tấm hình được không ta? Không biết mình có thể chụp chung một tấm hình được không? Before we end our section today, is it okay if you turn on your camera and we take our photos together?
Chào Sang, cảm ơn bạn vì cái bài chia sẻ của bạn, đặc biệt là những cái sản phẩm của bạn học sinh ở Đài Loan ấy. Tại vì trước đây mình cũng có học ở Đài Loan, mình học NCTU ấy,